Hello, everyone. I'm Benji Garcia, President of POWERinU Training and Coaching Philippines, and I'd like to welcome you again to our complimentary webinar, Rethinking Leadership, Reimagining the Future. Without further ado, let me introduce our speaker. Our speaker tonight is someone I consider a mentor. He is one of the reasons I pursued a career in human resources in my corporate life. Dr. Ramon B. Segismundo is a strategic human resources and business consultant, a leadership coach, a business strategy global management faculty with the De La Salle Graduate School of Business, and a business thought leadership influencer. He obtained his doctorate degree in business administration from the Singapore Management University. Mon brings with him several decades of international and Asia-Pacific human resources management experience with global multinational companies based in Singapore, London, and Pennsylvania, USA. In the Philippines, he served as the Chief Human Resources Officer of Meralco for 8 years until 2018. He is currently the co-chair of the newly formed Strategic Human Resources Subcommittee of the Management Association of the Philippines. Everyone, please welcome our speaker, Dr. Ramon Segismundo.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, POWERinU. Thank you, Benji. Thank you, Penny and Trina, for this wonderful opportunity to share my thoughts on leadership. So the title of my presentation is Rethinking Leadership, Reimagining the Future. And this existential crisis has made us all reflect on how we lead our people. And that's why I'm saying, let's reimagine or let's rethink leadership. And the fact that Churchill said, right, that we have to treat every crisis as an opportunity, including the crisis that we've been through for the past 2 years as an opportunity, gives us the opportunity to reimagine our future. Okay, so next slide, please. Before I discuss this particular slide, I would like to encourage everyone to please use the chat box so that we could have interactions in the course of my discussion on leadership. So please use the chat box as much as you can. Now, these are the forces affecting societies, organizations, and countries. Of course, we are on the verge of a cataclysmic climate change. We've been through COVID-19, and we all know that this is not going to be the last pandemic. There's the widening social inequalities, particularly in developing markets like the Philippines. Technology acceleration is another force that we have to contend with. The changing global order, as we've seen in the last 2 weeks, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the trend towards authoritarian populist regimes over the past few years, and other black swan events that we have not seen yet. So what am I really saying? It's an external environment that like no other, rapidly changing, and disruptive. Next slide, please. Which means that leaders like each of us can't really do more of the same. We really have to rethink how we lead. And next slide basically says that if you really think about it, everyone has been thrust into a leadership role, whatever level, whatever situation, whatever context. So each of us has the responsibility to lead the people around us, to lead in our thoughts and in our thinking, to lead towards the delivery of results, and to lead the organizations to innovate. Next slide, please. So what I'm really suggesting here is that in terms of rethinking leadership, there's probably 6 areas that we could look at. And this is not necessarily an exhaustive list, but these are the areas that I have seen to be hot buttons that current and future leaders need to press to be able not only to survive, but also to thrive in the future. In fact, the future is now. So basically, I'm saying, number 1, go green, blue. And I'm going to explain what that means exactly. 2 is to think meta, right? And of course, Facebook is not the favorite company of everyone at this stage. But I'm just using the word as a representative of many things that are happening in our world. 3rd is to radically equalize. 4th is to drive people first. 5th is to champion learning. And 6th is to practice self-leadership. So let me start with going green and blue. Now, green refers to, of course, the environment in the terrestrial world, while the blue refers to the environment in the aquatic world. So I just use these words as symbolism. Now, to me, the blueprint for this is the one that the United Nations developed or set up in 2015. And the acronym is SDGs, which stand for Sustainable Development Goals. And the objective at that point in time is that by the year 2030, we would have achieved great progress in 17 fronts. And if you take a look at the 17, I think there's no argument, right? That these are goals that are meant to foster development in its totality, total human development. So no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water, sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduce inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions, partnerships for the goals. Of course, COVID-19 has sort of grounded progress to slow down or possibly even to a halt. Okay, in terms of these 17 fronts. But I think this serves as a blueprint for leaders and organizations to exactly execute Going Green Blue as part of Rethinking Leadership. A company like Accenture globally specifically mentions support of the SDGs as one of its 3 key goals of the worldwide organization. Next slide, please. And embedding sustainability is a mantra that you're hearing a lot of organizations say. Used to be an adjunct of the business, mostly in foundations, but now sustainability has been embedded into the business. A lot of the global organizations, a lot of the progressive companies. The visual that I'm showing here is, of course, all the single-use plastic that really creates tremendous damage into our oceans, into our biospheres, and a lot of the companies have practically banned single-use plastic. And this is something that, of course, leaders in whatever level of organizations, in whatever size of organizations, could focus on. So, next slide, please. Now, thinking meta. Thinking meta. Crucial to this is digital transformation. And the basic question that is normally asked by leaders and up leaders is, does your organization have a digital strategy? So it used to be that IT, would come up with its own programs. So for example, ERP or ways of automating or digitalizing business processes. But in this day and age, especially with COVID-19, the digital strategy has become front and center of any business strategy. It has resulted in transforming business models, as we all know. This is something that we've seen in the past 2 years. And of course, part and parcel of this is the WFX strategy, which could either be work from home, work from the office, or work from anywhere, hybrid, and all those types of working arrangements. Next slide, please. And part of this thinking meta is the acronym SMAC, which stands for making sure that your business is in the social media space, that adopts mobile channels or a mobile first strategy, even dealing with analytics, and of course, leveraging the cloud. Of course, the joke that we had when we were dabbling into this was that SMAC could be also rearranged to be SCAM, SCAM, and that's why cybersecurity these days has become, again, in the middle of it all. In fact, I heard this morning that some companies, their cybersecurity units are now separate from the mainstream IT. Next slide, please. So part of thinking meta is looking at the future. So there is this acronym, which is FANG, F-A-A-N-G, which consists of the big tech companies: Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google, which is now Alphabet. Now, can anyone tell me in the chat box which big tech company is missing from this list of 5 companies? There's another company with a market capitalization that is bigger than any of these 5, which for some reason they have omitted from this acronym. Can you tell me what it is? So the clue is that it's in your computer. Anyone on the chat box? Microsoft, according to Nia. Yes. Now, I tried to research why Microsoft is not here, and they said that if you put an M to this acronym, it would not be an easy sounding acronym. But I think Microsoft should be in here. Okay, so even Cheryl guessed that it's Microsoft. Of course, the future is also artificial intelligence, right? And they say that by 2030, artificial intelligence will change the world, right? So you would see courses in Harvard, which looks at, managing and leading your businesses through AI, right? Practically embedding it in everything that you do. Machine learning practically, again, is predicted that it, in its full development would imitate intelligent human behavior. In fact, it's already happening, through robotics. But the interesting thing is, this word called metaverse. Okay, so metaverse is not yet fully defined, but it's a combination of virtual reality, augmented reality, right? Whereas before they were saying that live streaming is going to be the next big thing, they're now saying that metaverse is going to be the next big thing. So question here is your organization prepared, to embrace all these new technologies? According to Nia, AI will take over 40 to 50% of jobs in the next 10 to 15 years. So we must have a contingency plan for that, right? And that is what leaders should think about. Now, to explain more, this next big thing called metaverse, let me show you the trailer from the 2022 or 2021 movie on Space Jam. For those of you who are not millennials, the first Space Jam was in 1995, but they came up with a 2021 version which actually dabbles with the metaverse, featuring none other than the Lakers star, Big James LeBron. So ladies and gentlemen, part fantasy, part reality, but that's augmented reality plus virtual reality. And your organizations as leaders have to contend with, these new technologies. Okay, so moving on, radically equalize, which is the third point that I wanted to make. And by radically equalizing, I'm talking about shifting from focusing on shareholders to focusing on stakeholders. So if you're a leader, gone are the days when it was just all about profits. It was all just about income or shareholder value. You now have to look at all stakeholders, and you just have to treat shareholders as one stakeholder. And that's why, next slide, please. Enter this covenant for shared prosperity that has been promoted actively by the university, by the business school that I teach in. alongside the Management Association of the Philippines. You could look this up, right? I know it's a lot of words, but I just wanted to show you that indeed there's this covenant for shared prosperity. And I just wanted to highlight particular words to this visual, to this graphic. Take note of the fact that the objective of this covenant, which is a covenant amongst the business community and is meant to be a public-private civil society movement, is to ensure ethical wealth creation. In other words, wealth that is enjoyed by all, prosperity that is shared by everyone. So ethical wealth creation and the sharing of prosperity with all the stakeholders. And by stakeholders, we mean, and you'll have a copy of all these slides, right? So number one, this talks about the employee stakeholder, right? That the employees are stakeholders as well, right? In fact, 1 out of 6. Number 2 is about customers. Number 3 is about suppliers and their own workers. Number 4 is about communities in which we operate in. Number 5 is the environment that we've already discussed to a certain extent. And it's only number 6, which is about shareholders. And even it talks about both controlling and non-controlling shareholders. So we have to consider the interests of the minority shareholders as well, not only the majority. So this covenant basically illustrates that from a shareholder-focused mindset, we could be stakeholder-focused and equal attention to all 6 stakeholders. Next slide, please. And in all our dealings as leaders, we need to practice as part of good governance, basically 4 values, right? So justice. So this is something that has to be an organizational value as well, right? Do we provide our people with due process, right? Do we act on them only if there is just cause to initiate action? Fairness, not only are we looking at equity across the organization, but even looking at the multiplier of, let's say, CEO pay versus worker pay at the bottom. Openness, right? Are we truthful and honest in our communications as leaders? And is there transparency, right? In terms of what's really happening with the company, in terms of being authentic, in terms of sharing information that's important to our people, to our customers, and to our shareholders. So this is part of radically equalizing, our situations, our context in our role as leaders. Next slide, please. Now, moving on, as a fourth point is driving people first. And the key question here, and please feel free to comment in the chat box. Again, I'd like to encourage you. The first key question is your HR strategic? I've seen HR functions or HR departments that are relegated to be an administrative unit that takes care of all the grunt work in an organization. And to me, that's particularly not advisable, especially in this day and age. Is your HR officer at the same level as your finance officer, right? So does your HR have a voice, right, in the boardroom? Is it treated as an influential partner that influences business decisions? Next slide, please. Part of driving people first is asking the question, do you have a talent management process? Do you identify who your key talents are? And do you take steps to attract, retain, motivate, and engage them, right? Because it is your talent, I believe, that will spell the success or failure of your organization. Next slide, please. Another question is your HR going to dictate the future of your organization? Is it about building and developing capabilities for the future? Is it about implementing the strategy that the board or top management has agreed? Okay. Gone are the days when HR was about the cafeteria, or when it was about the clinic, or it was about admin functions. Gone are those days, right? So let's give HR and in the process, our people, the importance it deserves. Next slide, please. Now, championing learning is my second to the last point as part of rethinking leadership. And I highlight the word upskilling. In the developed world, a lot of talk has been about the great resignation and the great attrition, and they end up with leaner and meaner organizations. It's seems to be an employee's market right now rather than an employer's market. But with the remaining organization in those markets, there's an opportunity to upskill everyone. And an upskilled organization, of course, is a higher performing organization. And even in developing markets, key to the competitiveness of your company and key to national competitiveness is upskilling. Next slide, please. Another key word is reskilling. By reskilling your talents, by reskilling your works, your reskilled organization would be a more aligned organization, because when you reskill, you're basically aligning skills with strategy, right? And reskilling makes your organizations more resilient, because as the external environment changes, as disruption occurs, you need to reskill your people in an agile way. In other words, almost real time. Next slide, please. Which brings me to skill frameworks. It used to be called competency models in the past, but I've had experience dealing with the people that develop Singapore's skill frameworks. And as leaders in our respective organizations, we need to identify, in that context, we need to identify the critical careers in our organizations. And you could identify 8, 9, or 10 of those critical careers in your organization. And you could develop skills frameworks for each of those careers. So you're basically outlining roadmaps from entry level towards advanced level in each of those careers, thereby providing your people with a clear career roadmap. So that's championing learning. Next slide, please. And my last rethinking leadership point is about practicing personal leadership. And the best example of this right now, which is highly relevant, is the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. And I'll be showing this short video clip of him, but I want you to observe how he leads from the front, how he makes himself visible, and watch out his communications and messaging, which I found outstanding. Look for his glimpses of courage and commitment. But more importantly, Zelensky proves that leadership can resides in each and every one of us, no matter who we are, no matter where we come from. Okay, so leadership can come from everywhere. So roll the video, please, Rina.
Так, я тут. Ніяку зброю ми не складемо. Будемо захищати нашу державу.
Vladimir Zelensky is the president of Ukraine. Just as Zelensky emerged an unlikely president, he's now emerged an unlikely war hero. And this has proved itself a very fitting role. He's used social media to make his presidential addresses approachable and relatable. He's filming himself in selfie mode on the streets of Kyiv, wearing sweaters and t-shirts.
Всі ми тут захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. І так буде й далі.
That kind of communication has really resonated with Ukrainians and people around the world. And in his resolve to stay, it's clear he intends to defend his country and even die for it. When US officials offered to help him evacuate the city because he was in so much danger, he replied, "I need ammo, not a ride." His decision to stay, while, historically many other world leaders have fled, has really helped boost Ukrainian morale. People have drawn a stark contrast between his decision to stay and the decision of President Viktor Yanukovych in 2014 to leave. Afghans on Twitter have also bitterly noted that when the Taliban was closing in on Kabul in August, their president also chose to flee. It's also important to remember that domestically, Americans were probably first introduced to Zelensky during former President Trump's first impeachment. The president had allegedly withheld aid from Ukraine in a bid to pressure the country to investigate his political rivals.
They never thought I was going to release the phone call between the Ukrainian president and myself.
Before the Russian invasion, public opinion of President Zelensky was mixed. Some people thought that he wasn't trying hard enough to fight corruption in the country. Other people thought that he'd been too willing to appease Putin and have talks with Russia. But in this time of invasion, his willingness to stay and be in the streets has really boosted people's opinion of him. Before becoming the president of Ukraine, Zelensky's only experience as a politician was playing one on TV. In addition to his role on that satirical TV show, Zelensky made a name for himself in Ukraine as an actor and entertainer. He won Dancing with the Stars in 2006, and he was the voice of Ukrainian Paddington. He was also in a goofy, well-known comedy troupe. A lot of people have pointed out that perhaps this past experience as a performer has proved essential for right now. He's very good at connecting with people. He's really good on camera. He's really delivering these impassioned speeches that are effectively helping the world understand the experience of Ukrainians right now. One of the ways that Putin has justified the invasion of Ukraine is this idea of denazification. So he's argued that it's a fight against fascism. That's something that could resonate with Russians who sacrificed so much fighting Nazis in World War II. But of course, Ukraine's president is Jewish. He's lost family in the Holocaust. His grandfather, he said, was a Holocaust survivor. One of Zelensky's appeals went viral. He appealed to the European Union, and the translator of his speech got emotional.
We're fighting just for our land and for our freedom, despite the fact that all large cities of our country are now blocked.
In that way, he's not a distant statesman. He's really become the voice of his people who are under attack.
So if a comedian has become a president, any one of us could be, right? A leader. Okay, so to summarize, these are the 6 points of the leadership rethink, right? And I'll now turn it over to Benji for the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Mon, for sharing your thoughts, provoking us with your presentation this evening. As you said, we now open the floor for questions, and we'd like to encourage people to use the chat, or they may also raise their hand so that we can call on them and unmute them so they can deliver the question to you themselves. So we probably have time for only a few questions. But let me get started while people are still thinking through, digesting what they heard you say. Given the 6 points that you've shared, Mon, on leadership rethink, and for many of us, myself included, who are not really nation leaders or business leaders in a way, but perhaps we consider ourselves ordinary citizens, what's the first step? Where do you start?
Wow, Benji, that's really a great question, right? Where do you start, right? I believe that you've got to start by being yourself and staying true to your values, right? Because you can't get away from that, right? You have to start from where you are, right? Which means that you've got to have a generous amount of self-awareness, because it is through self-awareness that you'd be able to identify, what are the things that you should continue doing, what are the things that you should stop doing, and what are the things that you should start doing from a leadership point of view, Benji.
Thank you for that response, Mon. Again, we invite everyone to share their questions through the chat, or they can raise their hands and we'll have them unmuted so you can deliver the question yourself. I guess another question, Mon, and this goes to the last video. And this is probably more of an opinion really than fact, but I don't know. Maybe you're a personal friend of Zelensky. What do you think made him step up and take the role as a hero the way he has done so far?
Yes, I think he's in a burning platform right now. The survival of his country is at stake. I think Putin made it clear that his mission was to wipe Ukraine, right, out of the map. So in that particular situation, he has no reason but to step up, because the survival of himself and his people are at stake. And sometimes we are thrown into those situations. And sometimes we have to be thankful and be grateful that we're given those situations to lead. So it's not everyone that's given the chance, right? But even if we're not given the chance, we have an opportunity to demonstrate leadership.
I like that. Maybe not all of us will have an opportunity to lead a country, but in our own little way, there are certain opportunities, as you said, that come along where we will be having an opportunity to take the lead, align with our values, take a stand, and do whatever it takes to pursue whatever we believe is an honorable and noble mission that we can contribute to maybe our team, our family, maybe our barangay, and possibly the nation if we can, which I'm sure if we work together as a nation, there will be opportunities for that also. Once again, any questions from our group today?
Yeah, I think there's one from Cheryl. Yeah.
Okay, yes, thank you. Let me read that out. What advice would you give to small or micro businesses that want to enter the digital platform or approach but are unable to do so due to financial constraints?
Okay. The way I look at it, that we should consider digital platforms as investments, right? It's so easy to think about it as an expense, right? And that it is only for the here and now. But in reality, it's really an investment in your future. And if you take a look at platforms, they're now available in your smartphone, through apps, and it's not that expensive anymore, right? Especially if you're a small or micro business. And I guess part of it too is, we may not think platform, it may be, literacy, digital literacy, right? Equipping our people with the digital skills. So platform plus skills is equal to, getting into the digital space.
Okay, thank you. We have one from Penny, I think a rejoinder to our earlier topic. In considering stakeholders and not just shareholders, what if there is a disconnect in terms of values?
Oh, well, go ahead, Benji. Please finish.
Yeah, there's a follow-up statement here from Penny. Since stakeholders include external partners and suppliers, not just employees and customers.
Yes. Well, as we all know, right, Benji and Penny, the world is full of disconnects, right? There's always going to be disconnections. There's always going to be misalignments. But at the end of the day, the question is, are you ready to walk away if there's a disconnect or if there's a misalignment? And I've always told myself that even if there's no misalignment or even if there's no disconnect, you've got to have an exit strategy in place, right? Because you may profit, you may win the world, but in the process, lose your soul, right? So always remain true to your values. Always remain true to what you fight for and what you stand for, because that at the end of the day, that's the only ones that are really eternal.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that's worth reiterating. One of the initial steps for us is really to be clear, to understand what we value, what are important to us, and being true to that is something that will really help us move on in our own individual journey. Okay, we have a question here. If the challenge in the organization is cultural or mindset and systemic, it'll be difficult or challenging to rethink. What's your advice for middle managers and teams in this case?
Yes, I know it's pretty challenging when the top does not walk the talk, right? And the middle management ends up frustrated and disappointed. But we should not lose hope, right? The important thing is to engage top management in terms of dialogues, right? We should demonstrate courage, right? To express to management our view of what we think is the right thing to do, right? Yeah, I know it's so easy to say, but we have to be ready to lose our jobs, right? We've got to have an exit strategy, because at the end of the day, you may want to kowtow to top management or or play with top management, especially when you think they have lost their high ground. But let's face it, right? At the end of the day, God will have to reckon with us. Life is too short, and at the end of it all, we would be judged again by how much we've done the right thing.
Okay, thank you, Mon. I guess this will have to be our last question from Richel of CEU. His question is, what can you advise to those students who are lacking in confidence in leading, rather to take the lead in an organization? I guess this addresses the portion of our regular audience, our students.
Yeah, when I taught cross-cultural management in LaSalle, I found out that the Philippines has one of the highest power distance indices in the world, right? And I think there's still traces of our feudal culture where we hesitate to demonstrate leadership, right? And we don't have that confidence and courage to really show our leadership, right? So my advice to those students would be to be bold in terms of asserting their views, be bold in terms of testing the limits of the system, and just really voice out what's in their mind. It's all right to take risk and make mistakes, because you could always recover if you're wrong.
And that's part of the rethinking of leadership that I guess you have been proposing during this whole talk month.
Yes.
All right. And on that note, we'd like to thank you again, Dr. Ramon Segismundo, for gracing us with your 6 principles for reimagining leadership. And once again, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, for our audience here, so you don't miss out, we'd like you to, again, remind you to subscribe to our website, www.powerinu.com.ph, to get regular updates on events, our webinars, and free resources from POWERinU and its partners. Thank you once again for joining us in our complimentary webinar tonight. And we look forward to your joining us again on April 5 for our next webinar entitled Coaching 101, the Coach and Coachee's Perspective. Now, coaching is a leadership style, and as a service continues to gain traction in many parts of the world. It is also gaining popularity, particularly with organizations that realize its potential to impact their business. As one of the service organizations on the forefront of coaching, the directors of POWERinU Training and Coaching Philippines are going to share their unique perspective on this topic based on their own journey from corporate executives to experienced coaches. So in this webinar, you will learn what coaching is all about, what makes it different from other helping approaches, and the difference being between doing coaching versus being a coach. Our panelists will also share some tips on self-coaching, as well as what they've learned from some of the clients they have actually coached. So join us in this webinar and learn from the co-founders of POWERinU, who themselves are actually practicing coaches. So everyone who registered in this webinar will automatically get an email invite for our next webinar on April. Lastly, everyone can access the recording of this webinar through POWERinU's website, Facebook page, and also our YouTube channel. And before we officially end, we'd like to request for 10 seconds of your time to answer this short poll so we can get your feedback. Just click on the link we sent in the chat box, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. Once again, your responses will help us further improve. So thank you in advance for your feedback. So let's give everyone a few seconds. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us on this webinar, and we hope to see you again on April 5. Good night.